사랑합니다. 용인삼계고 7대 학생회의 송서진입니다. 2학년 교과서 1과 지문 시작하도록 하겠습니다. The art of preserving travel memories. One of the best things that travel gives us is the memories of the places we've visited and the special experience we had there. In order to hold on to these precious memories, we often bring home souvenirs. These souvenirs tend to be objects like postcards, fridge magnets, and keychains. However, a souvenir doesn't have to be something purchased in a gift shop. In fact, the word souvenir means memory in French. So whatever brings back memories could be called a souvenir. Then what can we keep as souvenirs to preserve our travel memories other than ordinary gift shop products? Let's look into what other travelers do to make their travel memories last longer. Make a plate with your travel maps. Buying souvenirs and taking photos can be good ways to remember a trip, but most of the time I would store these things somewhere and hardly ever look at them, and thus they would be slowly forgotten. So I came up with my own method of preserving memories in a more interesting and visible way. I started doing this 2 years ago when I got an opportunity to travel around Europe with one of my best friends. It was a spontaneous trip, so we relied mainly on paper maps from hostels or tourist information office. Every day, we planned our routes and sightseeing stops on those maps. When I returned home, I realized I had accumulated lots of these maps, and suddenly I thought I could make a souvenir out of them. I began by cutting out some landmarks from the map that show the best parts of our trip, such as the Eiffel Tower, St. Peter's Basilica, and the Colosseum. Then I got an ordinary plate and pasted the map pieces onto it using special glue. Finally, I put a layer of sealant over the whole plate so that the paper wouldn't fade or wear out over time. The result is a wonderful decoration that I can look at every day. It is also a terrific reminder of every place I've visited. Keep charms on a bracelet. Shortly after my wedding 30 years ago, I went on a road trip with my husband. We started in New York City and drove across the entire country to San Francisco. There, at a tiny souvenir shop, my husband found a bracelet charm in the shape of the Golden Gate Bridge. When I saw this cute little charm, I thought it would be a great souvenir to remember the trip, so I bought it to hang on my silver bracelet. This turned out to be the beginning of a lifelong tradition. After a few months, my husband and I got a chance to travel to Moscow. There, we happened to find a tiny St. Basil's Cathedral charm, and it reminded me of the fur charm from San Francisco. Without a moment's hesitation, we bought it to add to the bracelet. Since then, we have managed to find the perfect charm on every trip. We now have nearly 20 different charms, one from each trip. We have a Taj Mahal charm from India, a Parthenon charm from Greece, and even an elephant charm from Kenya. As my children grew up, they helped choose some of the charms, so our whole family can look back at every trip we've taken together. Saviors in cards and hotspots. Whether it's for uploading status message and selfies on social networks, or for looking up the best restaurants, staying connected online is not an option but a must for many travelers these days. However, Finding an affordable way to get a reliable connection when traveling overseas can be very challenging. So I buy a SIM card when I get to a foreign country. At a reasonable price, I can get the same connection speed as the locals. That's not all, because countries all have different telecommunication companies. Each SIM card is a unique souvenir of my trip to that country. What's more, as SIM cards don't take up luggage space, they're very easy to take home. I have a collection of 9 already, and it's growing fast. Another thing I collect might sound strange. Wi-Fi hotspots. Whenever I'm in a place I want to remember, I purposely connect to the Wi-Fi. Then, the hotspot name is automatically stored on my phone from that time on. Occasionally, I glance through the list of all the museums, resorts, restaurants, and other places I've visited in my travels. Although I can't connect to these hotspots, when I get home, just catching a glimpse of one of their names on the list makes me excited. Although I can't connect to these hotspots when I get home, just catching a glimpse of one of their names on the list makes me excited. All the memories from that place come floating into my mind, and I can't remember exactly what it was like to be. For example, at the peaceful terrace near the shore in Bali. For a moment, it's almost like I'm actually there. Make friends and keep in touch. For me, the best souvenirs are new friends I make while traveling. Obviously, I can't put the people in my suitcase to take them home, but while we're together, I can have conversations and laugh with them. Sometimes I add them on social media or ask for their contact information so that I can stay in touch with them. 2 years ago, I made friends with an elderly couple from Japan I met at the Jeonju Hanok village. While in the restroom, I happened upon a woman's bag. Right away, I took it to a nearby police station. When I got there, I met an elderly couple who had come there looking for their lost bag. Happily, the woman was the owner of the bag that I had found, so I handed it to them. They were so thankful that they treated me to dinner, and we had a great time together. We still keep in touch, and last year they even visited my home in Gyeongju. For me, this proves that a good relationship is the best souvenir because it can make the memories of trip last for a long time. Save precious memories with your own souvenirs. In the end, travel is really about personal memories and unique experiences that will color your soul and enrich your life. So, the next time you think about grabbing a souvenir as a reminder of your trip, remember, whatever captures your own precious moments will be better than any souvenir you can easily buy with money.
Lesson 2. Experiencing the Golden Years. Try as we might, we cannot stay young forever. Although this is a true everyone knows, the thought of becoming old is usually the furthest thing from our minds. That's why we rarely pay attention to the physical changes that make everyday life challenging for the elderly or the financial difficulties they may experience after retirement. Many of us consider these problems irrelevant to our lives, so we have little understanding of what it means to be old. In order to understand the elderly more, 27-year-old Regina Martin and 34-year-old Trent Bowman decided to participate in a TV documentary called Switching Ages. For a month, they transformed themselves into old people. In addition to learning how to work and talk like people in their 70s, Regina and Trent also spent 5 hours every morning putting on makeup to look older. They even wore heavy bodysuits and contact lenses that hindered their movements and eyesight. Finally, they wore fake teeth and gray wigs to complete their aged looks. Their amazing disguises, however, were only the tip of the iceberg of the transformation they would experience. Regina's story. Regina Martin has been a passionate dance instructor for the past 3 years. Although she is still a few years away from turning 30, Regina is starting to feel even more pressure to retain her looks. She obsessively takes care of her body and always eats healthy food. She has a strong fear of her youth disappearing and feels uncomfortable around old people, to the point where she is unwilling to visit her 81-year-old grandmother. On the first day of her challenge, Regina could only stare at her transformed self in disbelief. After a few minutes, Regina sighed and said, "This wrinkled face doesn't look nice." Later, Regina was sent to a tiny flat in a retirement complex, where she spent several days enduring solitude and gradually adapted to living alone. As part of the experiment, Regina worked at a grocery store that many elderly people visit. Thinking that they would be boring and stuffy, she was reluctant to have conversations with them at first. However, she soon found it very enjoyable to talk with them. She met older people who still enjoyed bike riding and others who liked playing video games. At a retirement complex, Regina joined the companionship group, and she was surprised to find that older people could still fall in love and suffer from broken hearts. Her new friendship continued to grow stronger over the next couple of weeks, and she began to feel as if she were their peer. As time went on, Regina started feeling guilty deceiving them. She decided to come clean about her real age to her two closest elderly friends, Susan and Charlotte, a week before the challenge was over. She worried that they might feel betrayed after her confession, but they just left it off and shared some life tips with her to help her enjoy her youth more. At the end of the experiment, Regina said, "I don't look at the elderly in the same way that I used to anymore. I have realized how ignorant I was. I couldn't see that old people are just like me. Now I can look past their gray hair and wrinkles and see the young people inside them. Instead of worrying about my looks fading, I'm now fully embracing the idea of growing old." Trent Story. Before participating in this documentary, Trent had very little interaction with elderly people except for his 77-year-old grandfather. He enjoyed his day-to-day life without worry and thought it quite satisfying to live in his parents' house. During the weekdays, Trent would spend his time working part-time at a restaurant. On the weekends, he would play basketball or go shopping with his friends. In short, Trent had little ambition and little money saved up for the future. But he didn't care. As he only lived in the present, Trent never thought about getting old. He just regarded the elderly as a strange tribe that he would never join. Spending a month fully disguised as a 72-year-old man was much more life-changing than Trent could have ever imagined. He could finally see for himself what it was like to live as a senior citizen in society. Early in the experiment, Trent tried to get on a bus to go downtown. Due to the special bodysuit and lenses, he had trouble climbing up the stairs of the bus. Then a person waiting behind him started rushing him, expressing annoyance. In his hurry to step onto the bus, Trent almost fell on the stairs. He was astonished to see the disrespectful attitude toward old people and the way they were treated. Later, he visited the restaurant where he once worked, but he noticed that no one paid attention to him. People acted as if he weren't there. Trent started to realize what it felt like to be invisible. However, there were some brighter moments that helped Trent have a more cheerful view of growing older. When Trent took a short trip to Colombia, he encountered a delightful older couple, Andrea 78 and Eunice 76, who were there to learn salsa dancing. While having a conversation with them, Trent was impressed by the fact that they were still healthy and content with their lives. The passion they still had for life inspired Trent to start making some huge changes in his life. I realized life was too short to just sit around and wait for things to happen to me, he said. Now that Trent knows how important it is to plan and save for the future, he has decided to find a more stable job and move out of his parents' house. Trent has also started to exercise regularly so that he can stay healthy and fully enjoy his golden years in the future. Living as an older person was a hard experience for both Regina and Trent, but they consider it an invaluable one. This once-in-a-lifetime opportunity helped them understand not only the physical changes that older people go through, but also the way society treats them. By working in someone else's shoes, Regina and Trent were able to see that the elderly also enjoy life with passion. Moreover, the experience changed the way they conduct their lives. They hope that this documentary will help awareness of the problems the elderly continue to face and help young people have a more positive view of growing older. Author Elizabeth Gilbert tells the fable of a great saint who would lead his followers in meditation. Just as the followers were dropping into their Zen moment, they would be disrupted by a cat that would walk through the temple, meowing and bothering everyone. The saint came up with a simple solution. He began to tie the cat to a pole during meditation sessions. This solution quickly developed into a ritual. Tie the cat to the pole first, meditate second. When the cat eventually died of natural causes, a religious crisis followed. What were the followers supposed to do? How could they possibly meditate without tying the cat to the pole? This story illustrates what I call invisible rules. These are habits and behaviors that have unnecessarily rigidified in rules. Although written rules can be resistant to change, invisible ones are more stubborn. They are the silent killers. Creativity is a step farther on from imagination. Imagination can be an entirely private process of internal consciousness. You might be lying motionless on your bed in a fever of imagination and no one would ever know. Private imaginings may have no outcomes in the world at all. Creativity does. Being creative involves doing something. It would be odd to describe as creative someone who never did anything. To call somebody creative suggests they are actively producing something in a deliberate way. People are not creative in the abstract. They are creative in something. In mathematics, in engineering, in writing, in music, in business, in whatever. Creativity involves putting your imagination to work. In a sense, creativity is applied imagination. News reporters are taught to start their stories with the most important information. The first sentence, called the lead, contains the most essential elements of the story. A good lead can convey a lot of information. After the lead, information is presented in decreasing order of importance. Journalists call this the inverted pyramid structure. The most important information, the widest part of the pyramid, is at the top. The inverted pyramid is great for readers, no matter what the reader's attention span, whether she reads only the lead or the entire story. The inverted pyramid maximizes the information she gets. Think of the alternative. If news stories were written like mysteries with a dramatic payoff at the end, then readers who broke off in mid-story would miss the point. Imagine waiting until the last sentence of a story to find out who won the presidential election or the Super Bowl. While working as a research fellow at Harvard, B.F. Skinner carried out a series of experiments on rats, using an invention that later became known as a Skinner box. A rat was placed in one of these boxes, which had a special bar fitted on the inside. Every time the rat pressed this bar, it was presented with food. The rate of bar pressing was automatically recorded. Initially, the rat might press the bar accidentally or simply out of curiosity, and as a consequence, receive some food. Over time, the rat learned that food appeared whenever the bar was pressed and began to press it purposefully in order to be fed. Comparing results from rats gives the positive reinforcement of food for their bar pressing behavior with those that were not or were presented with food at different rates. It became clear that when food appeared as a consequence of the rat's actions, this influenced its future behavior. Let's return to a time in which photographs were not in living color. During that period, people referred to pictures as photographs rather than black and white photographs, as we do today. The possibility of color did not exist, so it was unnecessary to insert the adjective black and white. However, suppose we did include the phrase black and white before the existence of color photography. By highlighting that reality, we become conscious of current limitations and thus open our minds to new possibilities and potential opportunities. World War I was given that name only after we were deeply embedded in World War II. Before that horrific period of the 1940s, World War I was simply called the Great War, or even worse, the war to end all wars. What if we had called it World War I 1918? Such a label might have made the possibility of a second worldwide conflict a greater reality for governments and individuals. We become conscious of issues when we explicitly identify them.
While leaders often face enormous pressures to make decisions quickly, premature decisions are the leading cause of decision failure. This is primarily because leaders respond to the superficial issue of a decision rather than taking the time to explore the underlying issues. Bob Carson is a good example of a leader exercising patience in the face of diverse issues. In the economic downturn of early 2001, real precision manufacturing faced a 30% drop in revenues. Some members of the senior leadership team favored layoffs and some favored salary reductions. While it would have been easy to push for a decision or call for a vote in order to ease the tension of the economic pressures, as co-CEO, Bob Carson helped the team work together and examine all of the issues. The team finally agreed on salary reductions, knowing that, to the best of their ability, they had thoroughly examined the implications of both possible decisions. Early in the term, our art professor projected an image of a monk. He expected the viewer standing on the shore, looking off into a blue sea and an enormous sky. The professor asked the class, "What do you see?" The darkened auditorium was silent. We looked and thought, as hard as possible to unearth the hidden meaning, but came up with nothing. We must have missed it. With dramatic exasperation, she answered her own question. "It's a painting of a monk. His back is to us. He is standing near the shore. Why didn't we see it?" So as not to bias us, she'd posed the question without revealing the artist or title of the work. To better understand your world, consciously acknowledge what you actually see, rather than guess at what you think you are supposed to see. Consider the story of two men quarreling in a library. One wants the window open and the other wants it closed. They argue back and forth about how much to leave it open, a crack, halfway, or 3/4 of the way. No solution satisfies them both. Enter the librarian. She asks one why he wants the window open. to get some fresh air. She asked the other why he wants it closed, to avoid a draft. After thinking a minute, she opened wide a window in the next room, bringing in fresh air without a draft. This story is typical of many negotiations. Since the parties' problem appears to be a conflict of position, they naturally tend to talk about positions and often reach on impasses. The librarian could not have invented a solution. She did if she had focused only on the two men's stated positions of wanting the window open or closed. Instead, she looked to their underlying interest of fresh air and no draft. Risk often arises from our uncertainty about how to approach the problems or situation. One way to avoid such risk is to contract with a party who is experienced and knows how to do it. For example, to minimize the financial risk associated with the capital cost of tooling and equipment for production of a large, complex system, a manufacturer might subcontract the production of the system's major components to suppliers familiar with those components. This relieves the manufacturer of the financial risk associated with the tooling and equipment to produce these components. However, transfer or one kind of risk often means inheriting other kinds. For example, subcontracting work for the components puts the manufacturer in the position of relying on outsiders, which increases the risks associated with quality control, scheduling, and the performance of the end item system. But these risks often can be reduced through careful management of the suppliers. Anna Thorndike, a primary care physician in Boston, had a crazy idea. She believed she could improve the eating habits of thousands of hospital staff and visitors without changing their willpower or motivation in the slightest way. In fact, she didn't plan on talking to them at all. Thorndike designed a study to alter the choice architecture of the hospital cafeteria. She started by changing how drinks were arranged in the room. Originally, the refrigerators located next to the cash registers in a cafeteria were filled with only soda. She added water as an option to each one. Additionally, she placed baskets of bottled water next to the food stations throughout the room. Soda was still in the primary refrigerators, but water was now available at all drink locations. Over the next 3 months, the number of soda sales at the hospital dropped by 11.4%. Meanwhile, sales of bottled water increased by 25.8%. 졸려. 네, 여러분 이렇게 2학년 시험범위 질문 리딩이 다 끝났습니다. 틈틈이 혹은 자기 전에 이렇게 들으시면서 공부하시는 여러분 정말 존경하고 또 수고가 많으십니다. 노력한 만큼 꼭 결과가 나올 테니까요. 걱정하지 마시고 푹 마음 놓고 주무시길 바라겠습니다. 안녕히 주무세요, 여러분. 잘 자요. 지금까지 쉴 때 학생이었습니다. 안녕.